we're going to jump right in and call this meeting to order. And our next, do you have the agenda up? And I've got it right here on my phone.
Oh, yes.
I don't know that we have anything else. We are not, oh, we have to pledge allegiance. Okay, everybody. Come on, we're gonna keep this official. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
For which it stands, one nation, under justice
Amen.
for all. Say, okay, we're keeping this legit. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I hope you all did that at home as well, or it's important. Okay, we are not going to be able to, or I guess I should ask, has our FOIA been
Yes.
approved? Okay. We are not going to be able to approve the minutes because half of us that are here were not at the March 21st meeting, so that'll have to wait until we gather the next time. So are there any corrections on the minutes, Katie, from you?
No, other than what you've already pointed out.
Okay, great. We don't have any citizens here. There aren't any probably online submissions. Nobody's just waiting to join us. So let's go ahead and turn it over to our guests and get an update on the progress.
Great. I am going to share my screen. Sorry if I can figure out how to do that on there. Zoom. Okay, share the screen.
There it goes.
Okay, do you see my screen?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So greetings, everybody. So Althea Wenderler Selby and I, Sandy Shannon, are here today with you. We are both architectural historians with Stantec. Our team conducted the Historic Resources Survey on behalf of the county that we're here today to tell you about. Althea and our colleague Emily Reed gave you a presentation last year at the beginning of the project to introduce it to you, and we've now conducted the survey and are here to share our results. So for today's agenda, we're going to quickly go over some of the background information first to refresh your memories. We'll explain the project background and the scope, explain why the county is doing this work. We will walk through the tasks that we took to complete the project, and then we'll get to the good stuff, the presentation of the results of the survey and our recommendations. The image here shows the survey area, which corresponds to St. Helena Island, and then the unincorporated areas of Beaufort County south of the Broad River. So Beaufort County contracted Stantec to conduct this project. It was jointly funded by the county and a National Park Service grant administered by the South Carolina Division of Archives and History, which is the state's Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO for short, in case I accidentally say that acronym at some point during this presentation. So historic resources surveys, what are they? They are a tool for municipalities to record an area's history and identify and document historic properties that may be eligible for local, state, and or national historic designation. The designation type most typically considered is National Register of Historic Places eligibility, which is what this project focused on. And then for this survey, the county specifically wanted us to look at properties in the survey area built between 1950 and 1979. The reason for that date range was because pre-1950 properties were surveyed in a 1998 survey. So the figure on the screen depicts the survey area and the construction period for each parcel based on available assessor data, which we always confirm in the field. But we use this data to help us focus on the parcels in red for this project, which were those with buildings constructed between 1950 and 1979. So you can kind of get a geographic idea of where those properties were. The exception to that 1950 to 1979 year built restriction was that the county wanted to resurvey 6 properties that were determined eligible for listing in the National Register in the 1998 survey, but they were not subsequently listed in the National Register. So those were the only pre-1950 properties included in the project. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that in addition to focusing on the post-World War II history of the area, Black history in the survey area was an area of particular focus for our research and survey. So there were three primary reasons the county decided to undertake this project. Number one was to update and expand on the historic context that was written for the 1998 survey of Beaufort County, which included history through the 1940s. The historic context is a written narrative of the major historical patterns in a survey area. We use them as part of our survey efforts as a tool to help us understand if a property has historic significance or not. The second primary reason the county took on this project was to identify historic properties and collections of properties not already listed in the National Register. That includes updated recommendations of eligibility for the 6 resources recommended eligible for the National Register in 1998, but not listed. 2 of those are shown here on the slide, the Edwards House Complex and the Coffin Point Praise House. And then we were also looking to identify new properties and districts built after 1950 that would be eligible for the National Register. The last reason the county pursued this project was to for future efforts. They want to be able to provide information that property owners could use to pursue future National Register nominations in the survey area. So aside from the fact that there was a survey completed in 1998 that documented properties built in 1949 or early, why are we focusing on resources built in 1950 or later? Beaufort County's late 19th and early 20th century history is already very well represented in the National Register. There are 20 individual properties in 9 historic districts listed in the National Register that all predate 1950 in Beaufort County, which is great. Some of the examples are pictured here on this slide: the Knights of Wiseman Hall, the Tomby Plantation, and the Defusky Island Historic District. So we did review the documentation of these resources and others like them that are already listed in the National Register because it helped us understand the broader history of the area for our current project, but the idea was to identify new historic places from our more recent past. So our project had 4 main tasks. First was community engagement outreach, which included the previous public meeting, a flyer, a questionnaire. We wanted to make sure the public was aware of the project and had the opportunity to share their knowledge with us about the places that matter to them from the survey period. We also did some social media outreach, that kind of thing. The second main task was the historic context development, and then the third was the survey itself. I'll get into those in more detail next. And then lastly, we had post fieldwork processing and reporting, which includes managing and finalizing all of our collected data and summarizing our results and recommendations into a report. So a little bit more about the historic context development. This was a big part of our survey effort. So I mentioned this briefly before, but before you do fieldwork for a historic resources survey, it's essential that you conduct research and prepare a historic context for the survey area and the historic period of interest, right? So the historic context helps us understand important historical trends or events that have occurred in the survey area, helps us understand who the important people were involved in the community during our time period of interest, or groups of people. It helps us understand where those trends or events occurred or where historically significant people lived or worked or did things of historic importance. To prepare our historic context, we conducted a lot of research. We used various online materials and archives like digitized archival newspapers and maps and photographs. We looked at sources like the Green Book of South Carolina and state resources like the African American Historic Places in South Carolina report, among many, many others. We also visited local repositories like the local libraries, the Caldwell Archives. We visited the Morris Center, the Bailey Museum at Penn Center, and the Fusky Island Historical Foundation. So as a result of our research, we compiled our historic context. Again, it focused specifically on the years between 1950 and 1979, and it covers 6 major themes in the survey area. So the themes are architecture, community planning and development, economic development, Black ethnic heritage, which encompasses culture and life, education and social history, public and private institutional development, and then recreation, culture, and leisure. So with the context written, we were able to begin to then narrow in on properties in our survey area with the most potential for eligibility for listing in the National Register. So onto the survey task. So as part of our pre-field preparations, we created an online GIS-based map that we could use on tablet computers in the field. It included information available from the county, like parcel data and the earliest county tax assessor construction date for a property. And then we also pinned in that map the locations of properties of interest, including those identified by members of the public as a result of our questionnaire, and then those we had already identified as a result of our historic context development that we know we wanted to pay special attention to when we were in the field. Next step was to conduct the actual windshield survey. So that consists of slowly and methodically driving every public street in the survey area and marking off where we had been on our tablet-based map. And then we would stop to document properties with the potential to be eligible for listing in the National Register. We also, of course, stopped at the 6 properties that were previously determined eligible for listing in the National Register as part of that 1998 survey effort, but then not subsequently listed. And we redocumented those properties. So documentation consisted of taking photographs of each property and noting information about the style, the age, the materials used on the exterior, alterations that were evident, things like that. We did our documentation from the public right-of-way, except for public properties or select private properties where we had coordinated with the county to obtain right of entry. So our results. Our fieldwork resulted in the documentation of 14 properties encompassing 34 resources, individual resources, a resource meaning a building, structure, object, or site. Though we looked at thousands and thousands and thousands of properties as part of our windshield survey effort, those that we stopped to document were 14 properties with 34 resources. So 14 of the resources were previously documented and determined eligible for listing in the National Register. 20 of those 34 resources were newly documented for the first time because of their potential for National Register eligibility, and they dated from that 1950 to 1979 range. The documented resources included a range of property types: residential, commercial, religious, industrial, etc. And then, as you can see on this map, the properties we documented are pretty evenly dispersed throughout the survey area. Let's see. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but at a high level, we recommended that 4 of the 6 previously determined eligible properties appear to remain eligible for listing in the National Register. And then we identified 3 newly documented properties that we recommended eligible. And then 1 district we recommended eligible. The South Carolina State Historic Preservation Office has reviewed our recommendations, and they have agreed with them, but we are still open to input from the public about the history of the resources we recommended eligible, or if there are any resources that people think that we missed. We would love to hear about that. So these are the resources that were previously determined eligible for the National Register, but were not subsequently listed. So we, as a result of our resurvey, agree that they still appear eligible because there have been few, if any, changes to them since their prior determinations of eligibility. So we have the Coffin Point Praise House and the Croft Praise House on St. Helena Island. Those are the left two images. Both of those are important for their association with the Gullah Geechee culture and as rare resource types with pre-Civil War origins. The Edwards House complex on Spring Island is important as an example of local tabby construction and the design landscape history of Southern plantations. And then we have the Gay Fish Company on St. Helena Island, which is important for its association with the seafood industry in Beaufort County and is one of the few shrimping companies in the county to persist through the 20th century. It's what we call a legacy business. So yeah, like I said, these properties have changed very little, if at all, since their original determination. So they would still be eligible for listing in the National Register. These three buildings here are all post-1950 buildings that we identified for the first time. They're newly surveyed and we recommended them eligible for the National Register. The first, the St. Helena Church of Christ on St. Helena Island is important because it is an uncommon example of a mid-20th century praise house. They were typically much earlier. And it reflects the continued use and importance of praise houses among the island's Black community. Next, we have Bradley's Seafood, also on St. Helena Island. It is a legacy business owned by the Bradley family. And like the Gay Fish Company property, it is important for its association with the shrimping industry in Beaufort County, but also for its association with Black history on the island. And then the last is the Folly Road Grocery. It is important as one of the most prominent Black-owned businesses on St. Helena Island in the mid to late 20th century. And it was an important resource for area residents as it provided access to groceries and goods for those without means of transportation to off-island stores. This one was actually identified by a member of the community in our public questionnaire. So that was a great addition. The Salt Marsh Cottages in Moss Creek Plantation is the district that we have recommended eligible for listing in the National Register. It is a late 1970s development. It has 6 clusters with 42 residential units surrounded by marshland, very scenic setting. The architect was Jackie Hoyt Lee of Lee and Partners, who was kind of one of the main architects involved in the development of Hilton Head Island. He was inspired by modernist and nature influenced designs. And then the landscape architect was Don Marion Guscio. We recommended the complex eligible for listing in the National Register because it is a good example of modernist architecture and planning. And it was the first example of a development with kind of Hilton Head style modernist architecture on the mainland of Beaufort County. Okay. During this survey, we also visited the listed historic districts, so the Penn Center National Historic Landmark District and the Defusky Island Historic District, Defusky Island, excuse me. We wanted to look at post-1950s buildings in those districts because they had not been well documented in the existing nominations. So those included the Retreat House at Penn Center and the Defusky Island Cooperative Store and Jolly Shores in the Defusky Island Historic District. So one of our recommendations is that we have encouraged the county to pursue more in-depth documentation of Penn Center civil rights era history, including this Retreat House, because that era is not as well documented in the National Register nomination as the earlier eras of Penn Center's history. Another recommendation we made was regarding potential local historic designations. So local historic designation programs are one of the strongest tools available to communities to protect their important historic resources through things like demolition delay reviews or certificates of appropriateness for proposed changes to the exterior of a building. a local designation program is created via an ordinance and a public process that establishes a process for designating individual landmarks and local historic districts. And so while Beaufort County does not currently have a local designation program, if one was created, we wanted to provide you with properties that could potentially meet the criteria that you would create for local designation. So some of the properties that we identified included a Corners local historic district we thought could be a possibility. We also thought the two post-1950 buildings that we showed before, the Defusky Island Cooperative Store and the Jolly Shores building on Defusky Island could be local landmarks as well. Okay, so next steps for the project. We are working on making edits to our draft report based on county and state historic preservation office feedback. And we will submit the final version of the report and the associated deliverables by January 24th. That being said, we still want to hear from the public if there's information about one of the recommended eligible properties that we missed, or if there's a property we missed in general, we'd love to hear about it. So I would say need that information in the next 5 days or so, by probably Tuesday, the 21st, to be able to review it and incorporate it as appropriate into the final deliverables. So after the report is finalized, what is next? Property owners and the county can determine if they want to pursue National Register designation for any of the resources that the state has determined eligible for listing in the National Register. So the survey project itself only identifies National Register eligible resources to be designated a National Register property. The property owner must undergo a formal nomination process with the State Historic Preservation Office and the National Park Service. That's a completely separate effort from a survey. That is it. I thank you for your time and attention. I have provided my contact information and Kristen's, which you know. If there are any questions or comments that you think of, or if you have any now, we would be happy to answer them.
I have just one, because I'm curious, what two surveyed pre-1950 sites did you decide were not eligible any longer?
Yeah, the first one was the Lightsea Cottage. It's a, circa 1930 private residence that has sustained pretty major alterations since the property was determined eligible. It has a very large addition and some new exterior materials. It looks very lovely, and I know that the property owners are very happy with their new living conditions, but because of the changes, it would no longer be eligible for listing in the National Register because it doesn't have the feel of a circa 1930s home anymore. The other property was the Pritchardville Primate Center, also sometimes referred to as the Monkey Farm. Now it's a complex of buildings that housed a research facility for the polio vaccine. And that is now in private hands and used for commercial purposes, and has a lot of new buildings built, and the older buildings associated with the primate center have been heavily modified.
Thanks, I was just curious.
Yep, good question.
I have one or two. I couldn't quite hear it. Your mic is kind of muffled. I don't know whether it's me or your mic, but anyway, those Tabby Ruins, was that on Spring Island?
Yes.
Okay. And the question I have is, like, for a district like the Corners, if a new and improvement has come in there, does that affect the historical qualifications? For example, they've put in that gas station, I think's
Is
been.
that at Frogmore? The corners, is that
Yeah,
at
the
Frogmore?
corners, that gas station is all
No,
new and shiny, and
Parker's.
I just wondered how improvements like that affect the overall eligibility.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we were looking at that area, we were thinking that if there's a local historic preservation program, designation program, that a boundary could be drawn kind of around that modern development. And as long as you have enough of a concentration of resources that share the same historical themes, right, and still have enough physical integrity to convey their historical appearance, right, then that is sufficient for creating a historic district. We were thinking that it would probably be a pretty small district in that area, but there were enough buildings that that one could form a district. But again, you just kind of have to exclude things like that gas station.
And what were you saying again about the monkey farm?
Yeah, so the monkey farm is now used as, I think it was like a commercial contractor, roofer, plumber company.
Are you talking about the one in Yemassee or
Or the one in Bluffton?
Bluffton?
It's Pritchardville, yeah, but.
Pritchardville.
Okay,
got
Pritchardville. All right.
No monkeys are escaping from there.
No monkey.
No, the monkey farm closed down after the polio vaccine was discovered. So it hasn't been in use for that purpose for many, many
There are
years.
no monkeys in Bluffton.
No, I'm sorry to disappoint.
Primate type.
I think we have several different monkey farms and monkey islands that we all use them interchangeably, and they're at least 3 different spots, right? So,
And it is my hill to die on to get rid of them from Beaufort County.
Well.
I hope
good luck
that
with
goes on the record.
all right.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I just another aside, because I'm intrigued about the Moss Creek designation. I'm thrilled to see it because I think it's really
I was surprised to see
important.
it.
I'm just tangentially work for the town of Hilton Head, and we're trying to do a little survey of historic properties to have a good survey. And I keep having to remind folks down there that, 1970 is historic.
Yeah.
And eligible for the National Register. And it still, it has a hard time sinking in with a lot of those. With that, are those, for a district like that, would it have to be multi-layered? I mean, would Moss Creek and then the individual owners, is that something that's even plausible with that many units?
Yeah, you're talking about like owner support.
Yeah, because if they're, how would it work within a gated community like that? I just wonder whether that makes it even another layer of complexity or maybe not.
Right, that's a good question. So even in a gated community, my understanding is that with the National Register, if there's a historic district proposed, they seek the input from the members of the community who own property only within the historic district.
Okay.
And as long as there's majority consent, then the district could be listed in the National Register.
Okay.
It obviously was built before the county had their 50-foot setback.
And and elevation requirements.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. One good hurricane.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. Katie, anything from you?
No, I don't have anything other than to add that the whole 1970s coming up, being eligible hurts. I was born in the 70s.
Agreed. Yes, 100%.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate the opportunity to take part in this project. It's been a really interesting one for us.
Look forward to seeing the full report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
All right. Do you have a motion to adjourn? Any other conversation?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're gonna adjourn.
Yeah.